Hello, this is the Council on Independent Fundamental Bible Doctrine. I'm doing my next video in the Amazing Word series, and this is regarding the scientific area of genetics. Okay, so we're going to look at how genetics, again, has proved the Bible right over and over and over again and again and again. Just fascinating stuff. All right. Psalms 139:16, Thine eyes did see my substance yet being unformed, and in thy book all my members are written, which in continuance were fashioned when as yet there was none of them. Okay. Watson and Crick did not discover that our genetics, or what we become, was written in DNA code till the 1950s. The Bible tells us that the directions for what our members, or body parts, should become was written down. Our DNA exists prior to our body forming its parts. And when was this written? 1000 BC, equaling about 3,000 years before the 1950s discovery. Though this one is not quite so dramatic as some of the others, the inferences that can be made from the statements that relate perfectly to science are extraordinary. No one knew anything about DNA or genetics 3,000 years ago, but this verse contains the knowledge. And interestingly enough, instead of only looking to the past to see the greatness of this passage, let us look to the future and note that science has learned how to clone through the use of genetics, which goes to show that the human body with its DNA information is very clearly made to be resurrected with a new body. Science has come nowhere close to understanding the software of humanity, but they're trying. They now have transhumanism, which they're trying to be able to understand more about the brain and those things and how it functions so that they might be able to actually clone a new body for you and take your consciousness and somehow understand how they could store it like it's stored within you, okay? And then move it to the new body. That's what they're working on now, okay? They've come nowhere close to understanding the software of humanity, but they have stumbled along enough to gain just a glimpse of what God has in store for the resurrection of the human body. You can have a brand new you. Okay, just like the Bible tells you. You're going to get a new body. Science has discovered that you can do that. The resurrection of the just to peace and the unjust to judgment is clearly housed in the DNA, which is present before we are made and after we have died. Just on a side note, this is why bad guys can get away with doing bad things. Though God hates it, he does not have to act now, because even the guy who gets away with it for his entire life and is never caught and dies in peace, wealth, and happiness, saying, "You didn't catch me," God is going to resurrect that person just to place judgment on them. That is why God can allow free will and sin in this world, because no one is going to get away with anything. But back to the task at hand, DNA, perfectly pictured in the Bible, which states it in such a way that just happens to demonstrate correct science thousands of years before mankind learned it. Your members, as the Bible calls them, your hands, your feet, your eyes, your stuff, they were written down before they were formed. Okay, yeah, it's called DNA. Okay, and the Bible knows about it thousands of years before we did. Genesis 5:4. And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begot sons and daughters. Verse 6. And Seth lived 105 years and begot Enosh. Well, many have always said, who did Adam's sons marry? Well, it's simple. They married their sisters. This practice continued even through the Middle Ages, particularly among royalty, who held to the practice longer than most any others to keep the royal blood pure and undefiled by the commoners. Okay, which really worked in reverse, because once the bloodline becomes saturated with recessive traits, you would actually be purer blood if you married someone else. But they had it wrong, of course. Interestingly enough, modern science has discovered recessive traits in the genes which are more likely to become the dominant trait if two people with the same recessive trait bear a child together. Science did not know this until after the discovery of genetics again in the 1950s. The Bible tells us in Leviticus 18:6, "None of you shall approach to any that is near kin to him to uncover their nakedness," or have sexual relations. Therefore, what you have in the Bible are records that originally brothers and sisters or close relatives could reproduce without any issues. And then all of a sudden, in the law of God given to Moses, God says, stop the practice. This is an incredible view of the knowledge of God, okay, and the knowledge of what the Bible has. It is demonstrating a knowledge that the gene pool was slowly being polluted, and that the recessive genes were beginning to show up in families, and that family members would have a greater chance of passing these recessive traits on to their offspring if they were producing offspring with other close family members. See, if God did not know this was happening, then there would have been no reason to change the practice that was already in place. There was nothing morally or ethically wrong with marrying your brother or sister prior to this. But yet God changed it. I mean, why would you even change that? You wouldn't unless you understood what was happening. Interestingly enough, science has determined that as time has passed, the gene pool has become more corrupted. What that means is that if you throw time into reverse, the gene pool becomes less corrupted, meaning that back at the beginning, there would have been a pure gene pool and no issues with marrying siblings. And as time has progressed and more impurities arise in the gene pool, the more important it is to avoid marriage of close relatives. And none of this was known until after the 1950s discoveries in genetics. And what do we have in the Bible? The people can marry siblings and close relatives for 2,600 years, and in around 1400, God changes the practice and tells them they should no longer do this. Wow. And related to this, science is just beginning to understand that all individuals descended from the same two persons. They have even named one of these persons mitochondrial Eve, because they have proven from mitochondrial DNA that all individuals everywhere that have ever lived came from the same woman. They have also named the man Y chromosomal Adam. Why? Because they have determined that all individuals came from the same man. Acts 17:26 states it better than most when it says, "And he hath made of one blood all nations of men to dwell upon the face of the earth." Just think about the genetic science, what they have discovered, that we all come from the same two people, one male and one female, exactly like what the Bible says. That people, how many things does the Bible have to get right before you start believing it? Science is just now beginning to understand these things and still does not have a full grasp of it yet by any means, not even close. However, the following facts were written in the Bible, including all individuals descending from one man and one woman, written in Genesis around 4,000 years prior to science catching up. And the fact that we should not marry close relatives after a certain point, and it was okay to do that before that certain point. And that's what science figures out thousands of years later, that back then, before a certain point, it would have been fine, But after a certain point, it's getting more risky. And that's what the Bible has. That's what it tells us to do. And then science figures it out thousands of years later, that is exactly what we have in reality. I mean, people, it's not close. I mean, science, whenever it learns something that is a fact, for sure, it matches what the Bible says. The Bible is still debating with these people. It's still fighting, showing it, its truth, and it's true, and it's still fighting, and it's been around for thousands of years. If it wasn't true, then it would have been long ago defeated. But it's not. Okay? And anybody who tells you it isn't looking at science, they're just looking at their opinion. Because when you go to science, the Bible is hanging in every step. And the Bible had the knowledge first. That's just killer. It's excellent. All right. Thanks a lot. I'll get another one up when I can.